The chamber was a masterpiece of Sin architecture, a perfectly spherical room suspended in the void between dimensions, its crystalline walls shifting with holographic data streams that pulsed like alien nervous systems. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at its center, a solitary human figure surrounded by representatives from 53 different sentient species. Her restraints weren't physical, not anymore. The quantum suppression field that encircled her was far more sophisticated. It was designed to neutralize human neural patterns, to dampen the very creativity that had made her species so dangerous. But Elena had spent years preparing for this moment. The primary prosecutor, a central archival coordinator named Vexnera, projected a series of holographic simulations. Each one told a story of human technological excess, cities reduced to ash, entire planetary systems destabilized by reckless experiments. The images were carefully curated, a narrative of destruction that painted humanity as a species of cosmic children playing with forces beyond their comprehension. Species Classification Report 7 Epsilon 9. Vexnera's translation device rendered its clicks and whistles into a flat, emotionless tone. Humanity, technological adolescence. Primary recommendation, permanent interdiction. Secondary recommendation, controlled technological regression. Elena knew the real trial wasn't happening in this chamber. It was happening in the microscopic interactions between her neural implant and the quantum suppression field. Each moment was a silent war of information, of potential. The holographic displays began to ripple, almost imperceptibly at first. Most of the alien delegates didn't notice, but Vexnera's compound eyes narrowed, sensing something was amiss. What they didn't know was that Elena's breakthrough wasn't just a technological innovation. It was a complete reimagining of how information could exist and propagate. The quantum suppression field wasn't stopping her, it was becoming her most powerful weapon. Her mentor, Dr. Marcus Chen, watched from a secured observation chamber. His own body was more machine than human, a living testament to humanity's ability to transcend biological limitations. A slight smile crossed his lips as he watched Elena work. The tribunal continued, oblivious to the subtle transformation happening around them. Historical records were presented, human conflicts, technological mishaps, moments of spectacular destruction. But each projection carried something extra now. Encoded within the very light patterns were seeds of information, complex algorithms that were simultaneously data, weapon, and message. Vexnera reached the crescendo of the prosecution's case. Humanity represents an existential threat to galactic stability. Your species demonstrates an unprecedented capacity for both innovation and destruction. The risk is mathematically unsustainable. At that moment, the chamber's perfect crystalline symmetry began to subtly distort. Data streams twisted, holographic projections flickered with impossible complexity. What looked like a technical malfunction was actually a sophisticated information attack. Elena's eyes never left the primary judges. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't defending. She was demonstrating. The quantum suppression field, designed to neutralize human neural creativity, was now acting as a massive distributed computing network. Each alien delegate's communication device, each sensor in the chamber, was being systematically integrated into a living, evolving information system. Threat assessment is fundamentally flawed. Elena spoke softly, her words carrying a precision that cut through the chamber's tension. Innovation cannot be contained. Adaptation is not destruction, it is evolution. Vexnera's translator struggled, producing a garbled mix of sounds that suggested something between panic and confusion. The holographic displays began to show not just human failures, but human potential, medical breakthroughs, environmental restoration, technological innovations that had saved entire ecosystems. The tribunal was losing control of its own narrative. When the final verdict came, complete interdiction, total technological restriction, it was almost an afterthought. The real decision had already been made in those microscopic moments of information exchange. Humanity wasn't going to be stopped. They were going to be transformed. As Elena was led away, The quantum suppression field around her pulsed with possibilities. To the alien delegates, it looked like a containment measure. To those who understood, it was the first breath of a revolution. The research complex beneath Europa's ice was more than a hidden facility. It was humanity's last sanctuary of pure innovation. Constructed within a massive cavern carved from the moon's frozen core, it resembled a living organism more than a traditional research station. Bioluminescent data streams pulsed through translucent walls. Quantum processors grew like crystalline fungal networks, and the very air hummed with potential. Marcus Chen stood at the central nexus, his body a seamless fusion of human biology and advanced cybernetic integration. His prosthetic nervous system wasn't just a replacement, it was an evolutionary leap. Each neural pathway was a quantum computing node, capable of processing information at speeds that would have driven a standard human mind into instantaneous madness. "We've got a problem," came a voice from the shadows. Dr. Kamara Okoro, a former military cryptanalyst with eyes that seemed to see through reality itself, stepped forward. Her hands moved in a complex dance, holographic displays blooming around her like digital flowers. "The concordance is getting closer to our backup sites. We've got less than 72 hours before they triangulate our primary communication nodes." Marcus didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked to a massive organic-looking structure that seemed to breathe and pulse with its own internal rhythm. It was the heart of their most ambitious project, a distributed computing network that could literally hide in the quantum noise of the universe. "Not a problem," he finally said, his voice a low, calculated resonance. "An opportunity." The team assembled. A dozen of humanity's most brilliant minds, each with a story of loss that had transformed into unbreakable determination. There was Dr. Yuki Tanaka, who had lost her entire research team to a concordance technological quarantine. Next to her, Alejandro Reyes, a quantum engineer whose entire family had been scattered across refugee colonies after the interdiction. They weren't just researchers. They were survivors, architects of humanity's future. A warning system triggered. A concordance surveillance drone had entered their outer detection range. But this wasn't going to be another game of cat and mouse. Marcus's plan was far more audacious. "Prepare the quantum entanglement protocol," he commanded. The team moved with a precision that suggested years of preparation. The drone approached, its advanced sensors sweeping the frozen landscape. It was a marvel of alien technology, capable of detecting the slightest electromagnetic anomaly, equipped with quantum resolution imaging that could theoretically see through kilometers of solid ice. What it didn't know was that it was already part of the plan. As the drone came within scanning range, something extraordinary happened. Instead of attempting to hide, the research complex seemed to expand. Quantum projection fields created multiple simultaneous realities, each one a potential location, each one both true and false simultaneously. Kamara's fingers danced across a holographic interface. "Initiating quantum hijack," she muttered. The drone's systems began to shift, its programming subtly rewritten in microseconds. Marcus watched with a predatory focus. This wasn't just about avoiding detection. It was about turning the instrument of their oppression into a tool of resistance. The drone's communication array suddenly lit up, broadcasting a series of data streams that appeared to be standard concordance surveillance reports. But buried within the transmission were seeds of something far more dangerous: adaptive information algorithms that would spread like a digital ecosystem through alien communication networks. "First stage complete," Kamara announced. The team around her didn't celebrate. There was no time for that. Dr. Tanaka approached a massive quantum processor that seemed to grow from the floor like a crystalline tree. "The migration protocols are ready," she said. "We can start moving our most critical research assets." Marcus turned, his cybernetic eye scanning the facility. "Not just our research," he corrected. "Our people." The plan was more than a technological escape. It was a cultural preservation, a way to ensure that humanity's essence would survive, regardless of the physical constraints imposed by the concordance. Outside, the ice of Europa continued its endless silent dance, but beneath its surface, a revolution was brewing. Quiet, relentless, and impossible to contain. "We're not running," Marcus said, more to himself than to anyone else. "We're evolving." The migration began with a whisper. Dr. Imani Collins watched from the observation deck of Waystation Prometheus, a research facility that had once been humanity's most advanced deep space research platform. Now it was becoming something else entirely, a living, breathing vessel of human potential. Around her, the station's internal structure was transforming. Walls shifted like living tissue, quantum adaptive materials rearranging themselves in real time. It wasn't just a technological metamorphosis, it was a cultural rebirth. "Quantum resonance at 78%, announced her colleague, Dr. Rafael Kojima, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. Initial substrate migration beginning in 3, 2, 1. The first wave of human consciousness began to transfer. It wasn't a simple data transfer. Each individual was making an impossible choice to become something beyond traditional human existence. Families were splitting, with some members choosing to remain in physical form, others opting to become pure information, adaptive networks that could exist across multiple platforms. Maria Rodriguez, a 12-year-old prodigy, was one of the first complete transfers. Her parents had spent years preparing her, understanding that her brilliant mind was too valuable to be confined by physical limitations. As her consciousness began to dissolve into the station's quantum network, she didn't feel fear. She felt expansion. "Substrate integrity holding," Raphael reported. But his words couldn't capture the miracle happening before their eyes. The Waystation Prometheus was no longer just a research facility. It was becoming a living ark, carrying the essence of human potential beyond the physical constraints of biology and space. In another section of the station, a different kind of migration was taking place. Dr. Aisha Okik oversaw the transfer of critical research data, centuries of human innovation compressed into quantum information packets that could survive almost anything. "We're not just preserving information," she muttered to herself. "We're creating a cultural seed." Each information packet was more than just data. It was encoded with adaptive algorithms, cultural context, human creativity. If discovered, it would look like random noise to most scanning systems. But to those who could truly understand, it was a complete cultural DNA. The concordance monitoring systems saw nothing unusual. A few power fluctuations, some standard maintenance protocols. They were looking for invasion, for aggression. They couldn't comprehend what was actually happening. A species learning to transcend its own physical limitations. Near Saturn, another research station began its transformation. The Kepler-9 Deep Research Facility had been humanity's most advanced exploration platform. Now, it was becoming a mobile technological organism. Commander Jack Novak watched as the entire station began to reconfigure. Massive quantum adaptive hull sections began to reshape, creating a structure that was part spacecraft, part living system. It could move, adapt, reproduce at a quantum level. "This is more than escape," Jack said to his second-in-command, Alina Sharma. "This is evolution." The most heart-wrenching transformations were deeply personal. Families made impossible choices. Some members would remain in physical form on various human colonies, while others would become pure information, existing in the quantum network. The Rodriguez family was a perfect example. Maria's physical body remained in stasis, while her consciousness became part of the Prometheus's living network. Her parents would continue their work on Mars, maintaining a quantum communication link that defied traditional understanding of connection. "Substrate migration at 92%, Raphael announced, but the numbers couldn't capture the emotional complexity of what was happening. It wasn't just a technological migration. It was a collective reimagining of what it meant to be human. As the final quantum transfers completed, something extraordinary happened. The various transformed human platforms, research stations, mobile habitats, information networks began to synchronize. not through traditional communication, but through a quantum entanglement that suggested a new form of collective consciousness. The Concordance was watching for weapons, for invasion forces. They were looking in the wrong direction entirely. What was happening was far more dangerous. Humanity was learning to exist beyond physical limitations, to become something that couldn't be contained, controlled, or understood by traditional means. Dr. Imani Collins looked out at the transformed waystation Prometheus and allowed herself a small smile. They weren't running. They were becoming something new. The Concordance's primary communication hub orbited a neutron star, a massive spherical structure that looked like a crystalline brain suspended in the void of space. Its defense systems were considered impenetrable, a mathematical marvel of predictive algorithms and quantum encryption that had maintained galactic communication stability for centuries. Dr. Zara Nkosi didn't see an impenetrable fortress. She saw a puzzle waiting to be solved. Her fingers danced across a holographic interface that seemed to breathe and pulse with living information. Around her, the remnants of humanity's most advanced cryptography team worked in a state of focused silence. They weren't just hackers or programmers. They were information architects, cultural surgeons performing delicate operations on the body of galactic communication. Target identified, whispered Dmitry Volkov, a former Russian intelligence operative whose neural implants allowed him to perceive data streams as complex musical compositions. The Concordance's primary communication node has a quantum resonance frequency that's slightly out of alignment with its secondary backup systems. It was more than just a technical observation. It was an invitation. The team's current mission wasn't about destruction. It was about transformation. Each algorithm they were preparing to deploy was a living piece of information, part code, part cultural DNA, part evolutionary seed. Their first target was deceptively simple: a routine communication protocol used by thousands of species across the galaxy. To most, it was a standard data transfer mechanism. To Zara and her team, it was a superhighway of potential. The attack began with something that looked like a minor system glitch, a microsecond of interference that would be invisible to most monitoring systems. But within that impossibly brief moment, millions of adaptive algorithms were introduced into the communication network. These weren't traditional viruses or malware. They were living information organisms, capable of adapting, learning, transforming the systems they inhabited. In a research center on a distant corporate world, a junior communication analyst noticed something strange. A routine data transfer seemed to carry an extra layer of complexity. The algorithms solved several long-standing computational problems in the process of transmission, almost as an afterthought. "It's like the data is improving itself," the analyst muttered, unable to explain the phenomenon. Across the galaxy, similar incidents began to occur. A medical research database suddenly found solutions to genetic treatment challenges that had stumped researchers for decades. An agricultural planning system developed more efficient crop rotation algorithms that increased planetary food production by 37%. The Concordance's monitoring systems were designed to detect aggressive interventions. They were looking for weapons, for invasive code, for traditional forms of technological warfare. They couldn't comprehend what was actually happening, a subtle, pervasive form of technological acupuncture that was transforming systems from within. "Second stage deployment," Zara announced, her voice calm. Dmitry's neural implants were already mapping the cascading information patterns. What looked like random data transfers to an outside observer was actually a complex dance of adaptive algorithms. Each transmission was simultaneously a communication, a solution, and a subtle cultural intervention. In the communication hub orbiting the neutron star, early warning systems began to flicker. But by the time anyone could raise an alarm, the transformation was already well underway. The most brilliant aspect of the human intervention was its subtlety. They weren't destroying systems, they were improving them. Each algorithm carried not just technical solutions, but subtle cultural narratives. Concepts of individual creativity, collaborative problem-solving, the value of unpredictability. These were woven into the very fabric of the information transfer. A concordance systems analyst tried to trace the source of the modifications, but the origin point was everywhere and nowhere. A quantum superposition of potential sources that defied traditional tracking methods. "It's like the data is alive," the analyst muttered, a hint of both terror and wonder in their voice. Zara allowed herself a slight smile. They weren't just resisting. They were rewriting the fundamental rules of technological interaction. As the final stages of the operation concluded, the team didn't celebrate. There was no dramatic moment of triumph, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that somewhere, across countless systems, humanity was spreading, not through conquest, but through pure, adaptive potential. The guerrilla war wasn't about fighting. It was about transformation. The transmission began in the most unexpected place. A small cultural archive on the peripheral world of Kix-9, a planet known for its vast repositories of interstellar art and communication. Aria Nakamura wasn't a soldier. She wasn't even a traditional activist. She was a curator, a keeper of stories, with hands that could weave narratives more powerful than any weapon. Her latest exhibition was supposed to be a simple retrospective of human artistic expression, fragments of creativity saved before the Concordance's total interdiction. What the Concordance didn't understand was that art was never just art. It was a weapon of cultural transformation. The first transmission looked like a standard archival display, a holographic installation showcasing human creativity. Paintings that seemed to breathe, musical compositions that evolved in real time, architectural designs that challenged fundamental understanding of space and form. But each piece carried something extra. Hidden within the visual and auditory frequencies were mimetic payloads, complex information structures that did more than communicate. They infected. They transformed. On a distant corporate research world, a young Syndral analyst named Vextor found himself unable to look away. The human art exhibition had been flagged as potentially subversive, but standard protocol demanded a complete review. What Vextor experienced was anything but standard. The paintings weren't just visual representations. They were complex problem-solving algorithms disguised as artistic expression. A landscape depicting a terraformed desert contained embedded solutions to planetary ecological restoration. A musical composition about human migration mapped out revolutionary approaches to interstellar population management. Each piece carried a philosophical virus, a way of thinking that challenged the rigid, mathematically precise worldview of the Concordance. Across the galaxy, similar exhibitions began to appear, not through coordinated invasion, but through a distributed network of cultural operatives who understood the true power of narrative. On the university world of Nexus Prime, a philosophy professor named Dr. Liana Chen watched the first transmissions with a knowing smile. She had spent years preparing for this moment, developing a theory of mimetic warfare that went far beyond traditional information transfer. "It's not about changing minds," she had told her students. "It's about expanding the very concept of what a mind can be." The art exhibitions were just the beginning. Each transmission carried layers of information, some visible, some operating at frequencies that most species couldn't even perceive. They were simultaneously cultural artifacts, educational resources, and adaptive information systems. A young Zarn artist named Krell found himself fundamentally transformed. What began as a casual encounter with a human artistic installation became a complete reimagining of creative potential. The human works didn't just challenge artistic conventions, they shattered the very concept of creative limitation. The Concordance's monitoring systems were designed to detect aggressive information transfer. They had protocols for technological invasion, for direct cultural manipulation. They had nothing to handle this, a form of resistance that was simultaneously art, education, philosophy, and technological intervention. Vextor's superiors demanded a report, but how could he explain an artistic experience that had fundamentally altered his understanding of existence? The human transmissions carried something that defied traditional analysis, a form of creativity that was itself a living, evolving system. Area Nakamura worked from a small studio that existed in multiple quantum states simultaneously. Each piece she curated was more than an artwork. It was a carefully constructed information payload designed to expand consciousness. "We're not fighting," she would often say. "We're remembering how to dream." The most brilliant aspect of the human intervention was its subtlety. They weren't trying to convince anyone of anything. They were offering a different way of perceiving reality, a perspective that was simultaneously more complex and more simple than anything the Concordance had encountered. Across hundreds of worlds, young members of various species began to see their own cultures differently. The human artistic transmissions didn't replace existing cultural frameworks. They expanded them, showed unexpected connections, revealed potential that had always existed but never been recognized. As the transmissions continued, something extraordinary began to happen. The very concept of cultural resistance was being transformed. This wasn't about opposition. It was about possibility. The Concordance watched, unable to comprehend that the most dangerous weapon was never a technology. It was an idea. The breakthrough didn't happen in a laboratory. It happened in a moment of pure desperation. Captain Jack Novak stood in the experimental chamber, surrounded by equipment that looked more like a living organism than a traditional spacecraft. His body was a fusion of biological adaptation and quantum interface, a testament to humanity's relentless drive to transcend limitations. Outside the chamber, the remnants of humanity's most advanced research team watched with a mixture of hope and terror. Dr. Elena Sharma's hands moved across a holographic interface that seemed to breathe and pulse with potential. Beside her, Dr. Rafael Kojima monitored systems that existed in states of perpetual quantum uncertainty. Initiating quantum resonance protocol, Jack's voice was calm, almost casual. But everyone knew the stakes. The Concordance's interdiction barriers weren't just physical obstacles. They were a sophisticated network of quantum-locked force fields that made faster-than-light travel impossible. Generations of scientists had tried to breach them. All had failed. What made this attempt different was its fundamental approach. Instead of trying to punch through the barrier, Jack and his team were attempting to exist simultaneously beyond and within it. The chamber began to pulse with a light that wasn't light, a quantum state that defied traditional understanding of electromagnetic radiation. Jack's body began to shimmer, becoming simultaneously solid and immaterial. Quantum synchronization at 62%, Elena reported, her voice tight with concentration. The experimental vessel, if it could be called a vessel, was unlike anything in galactic history. It wasn't constructed. It was grown, a living system that could adapt and reconfigure at the quantum level. Its hull was composed of adaptive materials that could shift between states of matter, information, and pure potential. Raphael's monitoring systems began to go haywire. The readings made no sense, which meant everything was going exactly as planned. "We're not trying to travel faster than light," Jack had explained during the initial briefings. "We're redefining what travel means." The breakthrough came from an unexpected intersection of disciplines. Quantum mechanics met biological adaptation. Information theory merged with consciousness research. The team had essentially created a method of transportation that was more about becoming than moving. As the quantum resonance reached critical levels, something extraordinary happened. The experimental vessel didn't just breach the interdiction barrier. It existed simultaneously in multiple locations, not as a trick of perception, but as a fundamental reality. On a monitoring station thousands of light-years away, a Concordance communication officer watched in disbelief as impossible data streams began to appear. A single vessel was registering simultaneous presence in 13 different star systems. "That's impossible," the officer muttered. Impossible was humanity's specialty. Jack's consciousness expanded beyond traditional understanding. He wasn't traveling. He was becoming. A state of existence that merged movement, information, and potential into a single moment of pure possibility. Dr. Sharma's calculations had predicted this moment, but prediction was nothing compared to experiencing it. The quantum breakthrough wasn't just a technological achievement. It was a fundamental reimagining of spatial existence. The first transmission came through as a burst of pure information, a signal that was simultaneously a message, a location, and a state of being. Most monitoring systems would interpret it as random noise. Those who could truly understand would recognize it as something far more profound. "We are not bound," the transmission seemed to say. Not through words, but through a complex quantum signature that carried the essence of human potential. In the experimental chamber, Jack's body began to stabilize, but he was fundamentally changed. His understanding of existence had expanded beyond anything previously conceived. The Concordance's interdiction barriers weren't just breached. They were rendered meaningless. Raphael looked at Elena, a moment of pure understanding passing between them. This wasn't just a technological breakthrough. This was the moment humanity transformed from a contained species to something entirely new. "Quantum resonance stabilized," Elena announced. But the words felt inadequate. They had done more than develop a new method of travel. They had redefined the very concept of movement, of existence, of potential. The vessel, Jack, existed everywhere and nowhere, a living demonstration that limitations were nothing more than a failure of imagination. The first human settlement appeared like a mirage, a complex, living ecosystem that seemed to shimmer between reality and possibility. Governor Area Chen stood on the observation deck of New Horizon, watching as the settlement took shape. This wasn't a traditional colony. It was a dynamic, adaptive network that could reconfigure itself based on environmental challenges, social needs, and collective creativity. The location was strategic, a binary star system on the edge of explored space, in a region the Concordance had long considered uninhabitable. Impossibly harsh radiation, unpredictable gravitational fluctuations, and extreme temperature variations had made it a dead zone for most known civilizations. Humans saw a challenge. Others saw a death sentence. The settlement grew like a living organism. Adaptive infrastructure that could shift and change. Molecular-level environmental adapters that transformed harsh radiation into usable energy. Complex ecological systems that were part technology, part biological innovation. Dr. Marcus Okoro, the chief ecological architect, watched as massive nanofabrication systems began to construct habitation modules. These weren't just buildings. They were living systems that could breathe, adapt, and evolve. Substrate integration at 76% announced an AI interface that was more of a collaborative partner than a simple computer system. The line between technology, biology, and consciousness was becoming increasingly blurred. Nearby, a group of refugee scientists from 3 different alien species worked alongside human researchers. They weren't just seeking shelter. They were participating in a radical reimagining of what a civilization could be. Zara Nakamura, a quantum communications specialist, was coordinating the settlement's most ambitious project, a communication network that didn't just transmit information, it evolved it. Each transmission was a living entity, capable of adapting, learning, transforming. The Concordance monitoring systems detected the settlement, but their traditional analysis tools failed spectacularly. What looked like a simple colonization effort was a complex, multidimensional transformation of an entire planetary ecosystem. "We're not just building a colony," Marcus explained to a group of newly arrived settlers. "We're creating a living system of potential." The settlement's first major challenge came quickly. A massive solar flare from the binary star system would have destroyed traditional human colonies. Here, it became an opportunity. Adaptive shield systems absorbed the radiation, converting its energy into a resource. Ecological systems recalibrated in real time, using the intense energy to accelerate biological processes. What would have been a catastrophic event became a moment of accelerated growth and innovation. Diplomatic envoys from marginalized species began to arrive. They weren't seeking protection. They were seeking a different model of existence. A delegation from the Zarn Collective, a species long oppressed by the Concordance's rigid social structures, brought with them centuries of suppressed cultural knowledge. Here, they found not just refuge, but a chance to reimagine their entire civilization. This is not a colony, Area Chen would often say. This is a living laboratory of human potential. The settlement's governance was a radical departure from traditional models. Decision-making was a fluid, adaptive process. Advanced AI systems worked in true collaboration with human and alien intelligences, creating a governance model that was simultaneously democratic, responsive, and evolutionary. Economic systems were equally revolutionary. Resources were treated as a living, dynamic system. Value wasn't determined by traditional metrics, but by potential for innovation, ecological balance, and collective growth. When the first Concordance reconnaissance mission approached, they expected to find a traditional settlement. What they discovered defied all their predictive models. The settlement wasn't just surviving in an impossible environment. It was thriving, transforming the very definition of what was possible. Zara's communication networks detected the approaching vessels long before traditional sensors would have. But instead of preparing for conflict, the settlement prepared for communication. "We're not here to fight," Area transmitted. "We're here to demonstrate another way of existing." The transmission carried layers of meaning, scientific data, cultural context, philosophical potential that would take years to fully decode. As the Concordance vessels hung in space, uncertain how to respond, New Horizon continued to grow, adapt, evolve. It wasn't just a settlement. It was a living demonstration that humanity's true strength was never about conquest. It was about potential. The final transformation began in silence. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before the Galactic Confluence, a gathering of representatives from 217 different sentient species. The chamber was a masterpiece of Sin architecture, a spherical space that seemed to exist simultaneously in multiple dimensional states. No weapons were present, no shields, no defensive systems, just pure potential. She wasn't there to argue. She was there to demonstrate. The holographic displays around her began to pulse, not with traditional data, but with living information streams that carried the collective narrative of human potential. Each transmission was a complex ecosystem of ideas, technological innovations, and cultural insights that defied traditional understanding. The Concordance representatives, those who had once sought to contain humanity, watched with a mixture of terror and fascination. What Elena presented wasn't a proposal. It was an invitation. Centuries of human development had culminated in this moment. Not a conquest, not a rebellion, but a fundamental reimagining of what civilization could be. The information streams showed more than technological achievements. They revealed a way of existing that was simultaneously more fluid, more adaptive, and more collaborative than anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Dr. Marcus Chen, now more information system than traditional human, provided the contextual framework. His consciousness existed across multiple platforms, the living demonstration of humanity's evolution. Containment was never possible, Marcus's transmission explained. Evolution is not a linear path. It's a complex, adaptive system. The most radical aspect of the presentation was its approach. Humanity wasn't offering a replacement for existing galactic structures. They were offering a method of transformation, a way for each species to discover its own unique potential. Vexenera, the same Syndral coordinator who had once led humanity's initial condemnation, now sat in stunned silence. The information streams revealed technological solutions to challenges that had plagued galactic civilization for millennia. Ecological restoration techniques, communication protocols that could bridge fundamental biological differences, adaptive governance models that could respond to complex, changing environments. But these were more than solutions. They were invitations. A young Zarn diplomat named Krell found himself transformed. The human presentation wasn't just information. It was a way of perceiving reality that challenged everything he had been taught. "We are not offering a new system," Elena's transmission explained. "We are offering a method of continuous becoming." The ecological restoration technologies were particularly revolutionary. Techniques developed in humanity's most challenging environments, the frozen moons of Europa, the radiation-bathed binary star systems, the quantum-uncertain research habitats, now offered solutions for planetary rehabilitation across the galaxy. Communication technologies that had been developed during humanity's period of isolation now provided unprecedented opportunities for cross-species understanding. These weren't just translation systems. They were adaptive empathy engines that could bridge fundamental cognitive differences. The most shocking revelation came from the collaborative research networks. Humanity hadn't just developed technologies. They had created living information ecosystems that could evolve, adapt, and grow. Civilization is not a destination, Marcus transmitted. It is a continuous process of discovery. The Concordance's foundational principles began to crumble. Their entire governance model, based on prediction, control, and rigid mathematical certainty, was revealed as fundamentally limited. What humanity offered was something far more dangerous than conquest. They offered possibility. Species that had been marginalized for millennia found themselves with unprecedented opportunities. The adaptive technologies weren't just tools. They were keys to collective potential. Elena's final transmission was both an explanation and an invitation. We are not separate. We are not in competition. We are a complex, adaptive system of collective potential. The chamber fell silent. And then something extraordinary happened. The representatives began to understand. Not through words, not through traditional communication, but through a shared moment of pure potential. As the transmission concluded, the holographic displays didn't fade. They transformed, becoming living, evolving systems that continued to grow, to change, to become. The old galactic order wasn't defeated. It was transcended. Humanity's greatest achievement wasn't a technology. It was a way of seeing.